Winged Foot is going to be great. I'm pumped. Pat, let's get to the course breakdown and learn a little bit more about Winged Foot while I check and make sure that Harry Higgs has, in fact, probably lost this golf tournament to Stuart effing Sink, who just birdied the 18th hole after hitting a 326-yard drive. If Stuart Sink is hitting a 326-yard drive and getting home in 2 on a 586-yard par 5, we got to roll the golf ball back, people. Like, this is appropriate for the USGA. It's USGA week. Let's roll the freaking golf ball back. I haven't been a proponent of that until now, but geez, I mean, Stuart Sink, 586-yard par 5, he gets there in 2, no problem. Taps in for birdie. Now Higgs has to eagle. My 100-to-1 bet is no longer.
Sorry about that. Let's get into the course breakdown, though, for the U.S. Open, which is more important because we're gonna hit way more bets than whatever this week. I think we'll see. Anyway, this is the 120th U.S. Open Championship being played at Winged Foot Golf Club. This is the West Course, the Winged Foot Golf Club. This is the West Course. It is a fantastic course and a great challenge for these guys. So I'm excited to see it. It is a par 70, playing almost 7,500 yards. You got 144 players in the field this week. Actually, 143 now because Scotty Scheffler is not in the field due to COVID, which really upsets me. I had him all over the place here before the show, and it just came out about an hour ago. So that is disappointing.
A big bummer. Hate that for Scotty.
Top 60 in ties, by the way, make the cut this week. Not 65 as we're used to.
That's a big deal. I think you should say that again for the people in the back.
Okay, one more time. Top 60 in ties out of this field of 144 players, 143, will make the cut this week. Top 60 in ties. That's 3 times I've said it now, so hopefully you will listen to that. This is an old school kind of parkland style golf course, an A.W. Tillinghast design. I love his courses. He is just a classical designer. Baltusrol was one of his designs, several other ones. I mean, the guy's just a great designer of golf courses. There's a lot of definition on this course, but not really like a ton of trees. It's kind of all right there in front of you. You got POA narrow fairways. The rough is going to be high. We've already seen reports on Twitter and things like that. People love to do the ball, like dropping the ball into the rough. Like
that is such the move. That is such the move.
You get so many of those tweets, but look, it's thick rough, okay? And they're narrow fairways. You've got to hit them. So that's very important. And then the greens, though, are where just the meat of this course is. You got Poana greens, or you could, some people may say bent, but they're really listed as 80% POA with some bent in there as well, but they're going to be bumpy. Severe undulation on these greens. A lot of comparisons to Augusta. A lot of them slope front to back. I think that's important to think about. And they're pretty small greens as well. So, they're tough to hit. They're undulating. I mean, everything about these greens makes them a major championship style course. So I think if you miss the greens, for sure, you're definitely going to have to be good at scrambling. I mean, you look at the last time they played here when Jeff Ogilvy won, he talked about that a little bit, about how he really scrambled well on this course. He was also second in the field in total driving, which is a stat we don't always look at now. Back then, they didn't have all these strokes gained stats, but basically it's when you look at length off the tee plus accuracy. So you're kind of going to want to mix that, like, distance and accuracy this week. If you can find those guys that sort of fit that category, I think you're going to find a guy that has a chance to do extremely well this week. I think it's going to play firm and fast. I don't know if you've looked at the weather, DB, but right now I don't know if there's a whole lot of rain in the forecast. And if we get it firm and fast,
there was not.
Yeah, if we get it firm and fast, this course is going to play. I mean, I think over par could win it. I mean, we'll see. And that's definitely what the USGA wants.
There's no rain in the forecast no like substantial chance of rain in the forecast until maybe Friday. And that's only 40%. And then Saturday and Sunday looks pretty clear. So it's gonna be dry.
Yeah. And they're not going to be turning the sprinklers on this week at all. So, you'll need to worry about that. But as far as stats, I'm definitely looking at form. I'm looking at that driving accuracy stat I mentioned with distance mixed in. I look at bogey avoidance always during the U.S. Open. Guys that aren't making big numbers, that aren't making a ton of bogeys, I think that's important as well. And then strokes gained approach and scrambling. Again, these greens are very tough to hit. You got to be great with your approach game. And if you do miss them, you got to be scrambling your ass off. So there you go. That is the quick course breakdown, DB.
Yeah, great course breakdown, Pat. Loved it. By the way, for those of you, I'll say it again, top 60 in ties. So and there's a lot of players. There's a lot of players. So you're going to have a very small percentage that get 6 of 6 through. We should all expect to see carnage. And with the way the golf course is setting up to play, there's not going to be a lot of birdies. There's probably not going to be any eagles, except somebody's going to luck box into one, I'm sure. But, a lot of the scoring is going to come from where these guys finish in the golf tournament, especially if you finish top 5, top 10, and you get those extra DraftKings points in terms of DFS. That's going to be a pretty big deal. So you need to think about that when you make your lineups. You got to think, I need lineup construction where literally if I can get 6 guys that have legitimate win equity and win upside in a lineup, that's what I need to shoot for. But you are going to have the winner in your lineup to even think about placing, in the top 0.5% of a GPP and tournament lineup if you're playing in some of the big ones, the Millie Makers, the things like that. Obviously I agree with a lot of the stats. Accuracy is a big deal. So we got a message tonight, Pat, from our friend on Instagram who is a caddy. He's walked the course today. And like everybody on Twitter is like, man, the rough is super thick. Good drivers of the golf ball are going to do great. Right now, it's still pretty slow and soft, but I know by the end of the week, it's going to be a nightmare. He says that the greens are going to be bouncing all over the place, is what he says. And that's what you get with POA anyway. And I think that tends to neutralize the good putters. I think it tends to bring all putters onto the same level. If you have, it doesn't mean that great putters can't still do well, but I think it takes a little bit of the pop out of the bat for a really, really good putter. So with POA greens and the bounciness and how firm they're likely to be, there is sub air under these green systems, so they can suck the air out of the moisture out of those things if they want and get them even faster on the weekend. They can burn these babies up to the ground if they want. So I don't really care that much about putting this week. I just don't. I know that these greens are tough. You mentioned how undulating they are. To me, that's all about distance control with your irons and wedges and creativity around the greens from a scrambling standpoint. I love what you said about Jeff Ogilvy talking about the scrambling. I think that's going to be a big deal. I'm weighting strokes gained around the green heavier than I normally do. Because of that. I do want guys that, hit fairways and hit greens, but listen, out here, it looks pretty inevitable that you could be the straightest guy out there and you're going to miss fairways and miss greens here. So you better be able to get it up and down. So I'm looking at that. I'm looking at bogey avoidance, patience, thinking about a mindset of a player, somebody that's not super aggressive, somebody that's got a little bit of, maybe a little long in the tooth, you know what I mean? A little bit of experience, not too aggressive, kind of a grinder type, par is your friend. And what we've seen over the years is most winners come out of the top 30 in the world. Top 30 in the world golf ranking is where most winners come from. So when you're constructing your lineups, you have to make sure you're looking at that going, okay, I have 3 or 4 or 5 guys in here that give me a legitimate chance of winning the tournament if I can't get all 6. So I think those are things to think of. And obviously in terms of DFS, ownership, right, Pat? It's all about ownership. So ownership leverage.
Definitely.
Good stuff, man.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you said. I wish there was a stat that if you want to talk about putting, a stat that could just like drill down the guys that putt really well on extremely fast undulating greens. But we don't have that. So you're just going to have to kind of, maybe go with those guys that are in good recent form as far as the putting is concerned and things like that. But I don't know. I agree. I don't know if I'm going to sit there and drill down too much on these. You have these guys though that do typically just tend to putt well on those type greens, and that's where really kind of watching golf comes into play a little bit.
Yeah.
Just paying attention to what's going on. But
You could narrow that down actually on Fantasy National if you knew the courses that fit that mold. So if you're a member at Fantasy National and you know like course 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are undulating, fast, POA, whatever greens, you could restrict your search to just those greens and look at guys who
True.
putted well there.
Yeah.
I don't know how big your sample size is going to be for something like that. I would be wary of that, but it is something you could do if you wanted to on Fantasy National. Speaking of Fantasy National, thanks to those guys for taking care of us 3rd year in a row, going on 4 years with Fantasy National. That is our go-to spot for stats, for ownership information, for lineup builders, lineup optimizers. That's where our models come from. That's where we find all these PGA Tour stats. All these stats that we reference come from, the majority of them come from Fantasy National. We've been using them for, like I said, almost 4 years now, and they take great care of Tour Junkies listeners. So if you haven't already signed up for Fantasy National, you can go to fantasynational.com/TJ and you get 20% off any subscription that you do. You can join weekly, monthly, or annually on Fantasy National. So you can try for this week. And then if you love it, keep it up. Change it to the month or the year membership, and you keep the 20% discount all the way through. It's a great thing. So go to fantasynational.com/TJ, or when you sign up, you can just use the promo code Tour Junkies. Tell them Tour Junkies sent you and get that 20% off and help us out too. It helps us out. So love the stuff over there at Fantasy National, and they've been taking care of us for a while. All right. Well, I feel like, there's so many things that people can get, information they can get on Winged Foot. I feel like that's enough about the golf course and kind of our approach as well.